y'all, it's Krista Watson here from Krista Quilts, and today we're going to do two free motion designs that are very closely related. These are called Cursive L's and Double L's, and both can be found in my book, 99 Machine Quilting Designs. So you know the drill, grab a sketch pad and some practice fabric, and you can sketch, then stitch right along with me. At the end of the episode, I'm going to come back and talk about the quilt behind me so you can see how you can apply what you practice to an actual full-size quilt. Let's get started. Cursive L's and Double L's are designs number 81 and 82 from the book, respectively. So let's start with some basic L shapes. I have an uppercase cursive L, and then I have a lowercase cursive L, and that's basically how I'm going to do these designs. So I can take my uppercase cursive L, and if I continue going from top to bottom, it creates a really nice loop design. Same thing if I take my lowercase cursive L and I just switch directions going horizontally, maybe it looks more like an S in that way. I can also come in the other direction and go left to right or right to left. It's really good to be able to draw these in any direction. So that's the basic idea. Now, if I take these together and I draw out some lines which represent seam lines, it's much easier to stitch if I have a guideline. So now I'm going to do that cursive L going from top to bottom again. I can do it in one direction, or I can do it in an opposite direction for a slightly different look. And same thing if I do it horizontally. Let me clear all these lines off. I'm going to just sketch this out on my little iPad. You can do the same thing on some paper. Let's practice going in different directions because you may want to stitch your quilt in different shapes depending on what your quilt design looks like. So getting comfortable going in all of these different directions really helps. And then finally, what's super fun about this design, let's say you have a little triangle or you have a diamond, you could actually stretch and elongate those designs. This kind of looks like a little Christmas tree, or you could do it in a fun diamond shape to really fill in the space. For my practice sample, I've drawn out some lines and shapes to stitch between. These will represent the seam lines on my quilt that I'm going to try to stitch as I form my cursive L's. So I'm quilting the cursive L's using free motion techniques, which means my feed dogs are dropped, I'm using a free motion foot, and I can stitch in any direction. I'm stitching one row of cursive L's, moving down my sample from top to bottom, while I form each of the L and loop designs from side to side. Notice how I will stop and anticipate the curve or the next line to stitch. Drawing this out on a bunch of practice paper first will help you get a feel for how the design will flow, and that's going to help you stitch it out a little bit more smoothly. As I'm stitching, my hands act as a hoop, and I'm only focusing on the area to stitch in between. I'm trying to hit the loop on each side of the lines that I've marked, but I'm not trying to space the design out perfectly, and there might be some slight variations as I stitch, and that's totally fine. Just remember, that's the beauty of handcrafted machine quilting, and each person is going to have their own unique quilting penmanship. As I stitch the next row, I'm not trying to line it up with the first row. Rather, I'm focusing on texture over perfection, and I'm trying to hit the line on each side. But if I miss the mark, that's fine too. My quilting designs are perfectly imperfect, and I really love how you can see the hand of the maker in my quilts. You can also stitch this design with a sample rotated horizontally, so try out both positions to see which feels most comfortable for you. Now here's how I would quilt the cursive L's in a diamond shape. I'm starting at the top of the shape and then stretching and elongating the design to fill in the entire space. I'm trying to hit my mark on both sides of the diamond to fill it in completely, but if I miss the sides, that's still okay. If my diamond shape is a little smaller, I would just scale down this motif to fit. And if it's larger, I may have to mark it because it's really hard to quilt larger motifs smoothly without stopping. Now, if I had some diamond blocks all in a row touching each other, I could quilt a continuous cursive L design through all of them without stopping to cut thread. So I'm just going to fill in this diamond and then show you how to quilt this entire area continuously. Once I get to the bottom of the diamond, I can continue to quilt any surrounding areas that touch without breaking thread. At the bottom, I'm simply going to change to another free motion design like pebbles or stipple. I'll fill in one area and then work my way up and around the diamond block until the entire background is filled. Now in this sample, I did not stitch in the ditch, but if this were a real quilt, I probably would, just to help outline that diamond shape a little bit more. Also, I'm using a contrasting thread so that you can clearly see what I'm doing on video, but on a real quilt, I would use more of a matching thread color that blends into my fabrics. I definitely don't want to see every wobble and bobble and imperfection as I stitch, and blending thread really helps hide those imperfections so all you see is yummy texture. Here are my cursive L's all stitched out on my practice sample. Just remember, practice makes progress. For the double cursive L's, I'm going to start off by sketching some guidelines to stitch in between, and then I'm going to start off with those big cursive L's going from top to bottom. If I come back in the opposite direction, then I can fill in the gaps and it looks like a really cool pattern. I really like the way that looks, but now let me show you a fun variation. I'm going to start the first pass again with the cursive L's, and when I come back for the second pass, I'm making these a little bit smaller just for a fun variation. So you can do those horizontally. Now I'm going to go ahead and sketch them out vertically as well. And for some reason, it's easier for my brain to go left to right, but you can go right to left in any direction. So again, here is my first row. And now if I come back in the opposite direction, I can fill it in either with ones that are the same size, or I can vary it up. And let's see if I can try this one from right to left. How does that feel? Okay, a little bit better now that I've had some practice. And then I will come back and I will fill in with a smaller row. And I really like the way that is. Really cute and adorable. Double L's are basically 2 rows of cursive L's quilted in 2 passes, 1 step at a time. I've started with some marked lines on my practice sample again, giving me guidelines to stitch in between. These represent those seams on the quilt. This is one of those designs that's actually easier to stitch in about 2 inches of width or less. Anything bigger and it can kind of get a little bit wonky. As I stitch the first pass of L's, I'm trying to form each little loop smoothly and evenly. The gloves are going to help me grip the quilt, and I'm going to stop with the needle down anytime I need to stop and shift and reposition my hands. With practice, you're going to get comfortable with all of these movements happening at the same time, so don't give up, just keep on going. When I get to the bottom of my sample, I'm not going to try to end the last part of the design on one particular side or the other. I'm just going to stop with the design where it happens naturally. Then I'll cut thread and start stitching the second part of this design. At the top of the second pass of L's, I'm going to start on the opposite side from where I started quilting the first row of L's to kind of create this mirror image design. As I'm stitching the second part of this design, I'm fitting that next set of loops and lines in between the first set and crossing over that line in the middle so it looks like a double pattern. This may feel funky the first time you do it, but once you get the hang of this design, it ends up looking so dynamic. I really like how it fills in all the spaces in between and ends up looking very elegant. For this version, I basically want both rows of L's to look the same, but I'm not stressing out about perfection here. Just remember, your eye will notice the overall pattern and texture rather than whether or not each motif is perfectly formed or evenly spaced. Now let me show you another fun variation. For this next row of double L's, I'm going to fill in the first pass like I normally would, aiming for those smooth curves and loops and hitting the guidelines on both sides of the design. That's going to keep it a little bit more consistent than if I didn't have those guidelines to follow. I'm quilting with relatively straight lines, but you could certainly do this with a wavy or wiggly line instead, and it would look just a little bit different. Now when I'm quilting the next pass of cursive L's, this is what's going to turn the design from a single L shape into double L's. But notice how I'm making that second set a little bit smaller. This change is another great way to hide imperfections in the design, and I think it actually ends up making the design look a little bit better. Just remember, play around with it both ways and see what you like. You can also try doing some lines smaller, some lines bigger to vary it a little bit more. In this close-up view, I've rotated my sample, so now I can quilt my cursive L's and double L's from side to side. To start, I'm going to tell myself that I'm quilting a lowercase cursive L to get me started. That helps me form the design in my mind even before I start stitching it on the sample. So now why would I quilt it horizontally instead of vertically? Well, number one, it might be easier. Depending on your quilt, it's easier to rotate it in one direction and quilt it from side to side. Or maybe for some reason, like for me, it's easier to stitch the design in one direction versus another. Sometimes your sewing machine may make a better stitch when you stitch in one direction versus the other. So you know what? Make sure you practice it first, stitching it in multiple directions on a couple practice samples, and that's going to be a really great way for you to test all of these things out. Getting all of these things worked out ahead of time will really set you up for success once it comes time to quilt your quilt. So once I've quilted the first horizontal pass, I'll go back to the start of my design and quilt a second pass to fill in all the gaps. I'm quilting it backwards, or basically a mirror image of the first design. It's going to seem a little funky at first, but give it a try and it will get easier the more time you practice, I promise. I personally prefer to quilt this design from top to bottom rather than from side to side, but it's good to practice both for more flexibility, especially when you're applying this design on a real full-size quilt. I'll go ahead and quilt one more horizontal row of double L's, and this time I'll show you how I would quilt both parts of the design continuously. To avoid cutting thread, I can stitch in the ditch along a seam to start the second pass of quilting, and then begin stitching again with those L's from left to right horizontally across my sample. Remember, you can make both parts of the design the same size, or you can make one smaller. This design takes a little more thinking as you stitch, but the results are well worth it. I really like the look of these double L's all stitched out on my finished sample. Now I'm ready to do it on a quilt. Don't you just love those pretty designs? I think they add a touch of elegance to any quilt. So now I want to talk to you about how I quilted the cursive L's on this quilt shown behind me called Beaded Lanterns. Now I've made this quilt several times. In this version of it, I used those L's in the lantern blocks. This is actually one of my free patterns that you can get as a free PDF download. Be sure to check the description box. In the free pattern, it includes a step-by-step quilting plan that I want to go over a little bit. So first of all, you're going to stitch in the ditch on the left and right of each row of blocks, starting at the top and working your way all the way to the bottom. Then you can echo the ditch or outline what you just stitched to give it a little bit more of a pop. The third thing you want to do is you want to come back and fill in the background with a really dense texture like pebbles, and that's another video if you want to go and refer to that. And then finally, I came back and I did that continuous cursive L's from the top to the bottom in each row of the quilt. This is a really simple way to add that wow factor to your quilts, and it really looks good. Now in this next quilt called Dot and Dash, I've used the double L's together to again create a little bit of elegance. The pattern for this quilt can be found in my book, Piece and Quilt with Pre-Cuts. Now in the book, I made a different version of Dot and Dash, but I always like to make my quilts more than once to try out different quilting plans. So you can see a little bit of video here showing how I would quilt the double L's, first with one pass and then with the second pass. So you know what I always say, practice these designs, quilt them on real quilts, and that's going to give you the experience you need to get comfortable with free motion quilting. Be sure to check out the description box to links to everything I've mentioned, where to get my books, bonus freebies like this pattern, and so much more. I hope you're enjoying this series. I'll see you in the next one.